Okay, let's begin making some object-oriented code. I would like to start off by just making the basics of our sketch, and I invite you to do this along with me as well. You're going to have a checkpoint that's going to be based on this code, so get that code typed out, try it out, experiment with it, and then try the checkpoint later on. So first, we'll just kind of make something that's object-oriented. We'll start with good old void setup and draw. That hasn't changed. We're still going to be making use of these things. And I'm going to make a sketch that's like maybe size, I don't know, it doesn't matter, 600. 600 will fit nicely on the video screen. And then I guess I will make a black background. And what I'd like to make is what I'm going to refer to as a mover, which I am borrowing from Daniel Shiffman. Actually, do I have the book handy? Yeah. This is called The Nature of Code. Daniel Shiffman is an amazing teacher at NYU, and he teaches processing, and he's really inspired me, to teach object-oriented programming, and he's got some great ideas in this book. So we're going to make one of those examples. It is called a mover, and basically it's going to be a circle that jitters around. I'm just going to program a non-object-oriented version of it. It's going to be a circle. And I'll just leave the colors as default, whatever those will be right now. Let's put in a stroke weight. It won't really matter because it's a black background. Stroke weight 5. I'll have a stroke of black and a fill. I don't know, whatever, white. And then it's going to be a circle with x and y coordinates, and let's make it maybe like 100 as its diameter. Seems maybe a little bit small. Those variables need declaring, so I'm going to go float x, float y. Actually, I just do x and y. And what I want to do is make it kind of jitter around the screen. So I'm going to be assigning values to x. Let's start x at the center of the screen. So it could be 300. I like to just, whatever, make it more of a formula. And then I'm going to just say x equals x, or maybe, x equals x plus a random number between -2 and +2. And I'll do the same thing for y as well. So again, we haven't done any object-oriented programming. This is not an object-oriented program. It's very much what's called a procedural program. The lines of code just happen one at a time. If we run this, we'll get kind of a cool little shaky bro. Little circle that's kind of, this is a very anxious circle that's dancing around. I kind of want to make it a bigger circle. No, it's fine actually. We'll leave it as it is. So it's just dancing around and having a good time. And here's the question that I want you to think about that will lead us to object-oriented programming. What if I wanted 1,000 of these circles? If I wanted to make 1,000 little movers that are all shaking around and bouncing around and see what that would look like, what would we do? So that's what we need objects for. If you want to, it's same with Minecraft. You have, I don't know how many billions of potential blocks that exist in the universe. When you encounter the blocks and you see them, they need to create them in the game. So you don't want to program each individual one. That would be a nightmare. So that's where classes come in. So we're going to turn this into a class. Okay. I'm going to make a new tab. You don't have to make a new tab for these, but it does help organize your program. It's going to be called a mover. Do you see why it's a mover? It's kind of moving around. So you start off a class with the word class, not surprisingly, and you spell mover correctly usually. And notice that there's no parentheses here. This isn't a function. It is a class, so it's a little bit different. So a class has 3 things that it must include. It includes instance variables. So instance variables are the variables that each mover needs to remember. So what does our mover need to remember? It needs to remember float x and y. So we'll paste that in over here. Then it needs what's called a constructor. A constructor is a special function with no void or any return type in front of it, and its name is the same as the class. It looks like this, mover. And it just sets the instance variable's initial values. It's very much what setup did over here. So we're literally going to be able to take that out of setup and go here. You could think of a constructor as sort of maybe private's not the best word because that means something in Java, but it's the object's own setup. It's a setup just for this objects that are created from this class. So you can think of constructors as Yeah, just a special way of setting up this particular type of object. And then we need some behavior functions. Behavior functions are the things that a mover can do. So we're going to program in. They usually have verbs for names. So they look like just a regular function, void. I'm going to break it into show and act. Show is basically drawing themselves on the screen, and act is just doing their little whatever they are supposed to do. We could call this anything, though. They aren't special names. We could call this, move would make sense, but we're going to call it that. So what does it look like? It looks like this. So I'm going to take that bit of code. I'm going to stick it in the show function. And how does it move? Well, it moves like this. Okay, so there we go. So, that didn't really paste anything. Well, I'll just paste it in. I'll just type it in. X equals x plus a random number between these parameters, and y equals a random number between these parameters. Okay, there we go. So I have now made a class. So again, it's got the three parts. It's got the instance variables. This is the information that a mover needs to keep track of, right? It's coordinates in this case. A constructor initializes the variables. So, its own kind of private setup. Private, again, not the best word, but its own individual setup. And then we have the behavior functions. So we have a show and an act. So this is drawing itself on the screen, and this is acting. In this case, moving, doing whatever action it needs to do. So if we go back to our main tab and run this program, it's not going to do anything. You might be like, what was the point of all this? So we're not quite done yet. Because we have made this into a blueprint, no such object exists yet. It's just a blueprint, just as much as you can't drive a blueprint of a Ferrari, right? You'd have to have the Ferrari people build it from the blueprint. So we need to build our object. So the way you build an object is first you need a place to put it. So we're going to make a variable. I'm going to make a mover variable. I'll call it myMover. myMover. This is a standard way of doing an example. Often the word my is put in the front of the class. So note that this is the class. It's the type of thing we're making, and this is the name of the actual thing that we're creating, myMover. So that just creates a place to put it. We actually have to call the constructor now. The way you do that is with this, myMover equals new mover. There it is. That's the story. That's what I'm doing. Notice this is the constructor here. It's exactly what this is. And the new keyword is new to us, no pun intended. That's used with the constructor in conjunction to create the object. And then it stores it inside of, or technically it stores a link or a reference to the object inside of this variable. And now from that variable, I could tell it to act and show. So I can say the name of the mover, myMover, dot act, myMover, dot show. Okay, so now we're going to get ourselves our mover. We're back to square one. We got our mover again. So that's nice. We can make another mover if we want to. We can make myMover, 1 and myMover 2 and so on. But it turns out there's a better way to do this, and that's going to involve arrays or lists or other kind of data structures. And we're going to take a look at that in the next video. So far what we've done is we created a class with the three things every class needs to have. And we have now created the object, but you might notice it's still not really helping us very much. It's still not all that much easier than having just programmed it ourselves. So the next video is going to show us how we can use an array of movers and a loop to automate all these processes. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you in the next video.